Welcome to the Pansa Pansa Forum. In the Yoruba language, the word pansa is usually injected into poetry to express an uncomfortable, uncensored, and inconvenient truth. The Pansa Pansa Forum is candid conversations about the life of African immigrants in America as it relates to their adaptation to their new home. While some may find it easy to integrate and can balance between retaining the original African culture while accepting the culture of their new home, many continue to struggle to find a balance between both worlds.
Welcome to Pansa Pansa. I'm your host, Kemi, and today I'm so happy to welcome Mr. Chinedu Achebe again to Pansa Pansa Podcast. Chinedu is an insightful storyteller, cultural commentator, and author of deeply personal, powerful novels, When It All Falls Down, a continuation of his earlier work, The Miseducation of Obi Ifeayin. In this book, he invites us into a layer world of Obi, a Nigerian American navigating fatherhood, marriage, politics, cultural expectation, identity, and examine the legacy in America. Mr. Achebe has been on podcasts in the past, and this is his second time of being here. In his writing, he doesn't shy away from difficult truth. He pushes us to reflect on the choices we inherit, the ones we make, and the ones we hope our children will understand. So welcome to Pansa Pansa, Mr. Chinedu Achebe, and thank you for coming on this podcast to talk about your new publication to our listeners and, African in this diaspora. And as I would start with this conversation, would you like to further talk a little bit about your background to our audience and briefly talk about the books?
Thank you for the platform again. My name's Chinedu Achebe. I'm a Nigerian American. I was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia. Both parents, Nigerian immigrants, live different places in the U.S. Currently, I live in Houston, Texas with my wife and 2 kids. And the book was something that I wasn't sure I was going to write another book, but after the second one, but during COVID, a lot was going on in my life. My oldest was maybe about 7, 8 months, maybe almost a year old when everything shut down, and just seeing everything happening in the world. And it kind of made me like, maybe there's something to bring back the characters. I didn't think we would top 2020, but I guess we are. I thought 2020 was like, okay, this is it. But everything that happened in 2020, all of the COVID to race relations, and then just all these things that were happening in characters' lives. And, I felt that it was something for me to explore again. So that was the reason why I decided to write again.
That was beautiful. I read it from cover to cover. As I was reading it, I was making notes. I said, this is a good point. This is a good point. This is a good point. So you opened the book with a touching dedication to your father. I'm so sorry about your loss. Can you share what your relationship was with him like when he was alive?
Oh, yeah. My dad, he passed last year, March. So this was around the time the book was, I had just finished sending it to the editor, and he had some health issues. My father, we were very close. I mean, he was everything I know about social issues, politics. When I was a kid, I was always an inquisitive kid. I was like, hey, Dad, what's going on here? What's going on here? And he would just sit and talk with me about it. And he always gave me a lot of advice. When I was younger, I didn't understand. I was like, Dad, you're old. Not old, but you're older. And as I got older, I understood it. And then he started telling me about how he was and how he came to the U.S. and how his father wasn't really receptive. He had a good job working at a bank. And his dad's like, why do you want to come to America for? You have this. You start realizing as you get older, you want to protect your kids and shield them from things. We were very close. We always did, like all kids, you didn't always agree with your parents, but we always found a way to understand each other. I miss him. I love him. And I put it in the book. He would go to Nigeria, and when I was in middle school, and he would get all the Chinedu Achebe books, back in the 90s when, I was always inquisitive, and my mom would be like, hey, go get the books. And he'd bring all the books. So, the book that inspired me was no longer at ease because, when I read it, it kind of made me think about my dad and how he was one of the people, he came to the US in the early 60s. So seeing how reading about how Nigeria was pre-colonial and all of that. He didn't know that he was doing that. I think we were just, when I was a kid, I was just listening to stuff, and who knew all these years later that all that would manifest. So but yeah, I miss him dearly, and but yeah, he played a role. It's my mom did too, so I don't want to say that, but he played a role in my political awareness, understanding things of that sort. So.
And I'm so happy, I'm so glad that, you have so much close relationship with him, because many children will wish they have close relationship with their father, even though the father may be present within the household. But many grew up in a home whereby father kind of like separate themselves in terms of, having talking back and forth, sharing wisdom. So, and I'm glad you have that. I could see from reading the book, the dedication, the connection you have with him really shows from your writing. And I'm so sorry, Ms. So continue to rest in peace.
Thank you.
So in the continuation of Obi of Ifeayin, what motivates you to continue to tell the story in this new book?
When I wrote in the Miseducation, when I first published it, me and my wife now, but at the time we had just got engaged we were dating and then eventually got engaged. When I was writing about fatherhood and that, a lot of it was from perspectives of what I thought of people. When I wrote this book, my oldest was born and then, my youngest came. So I was actually writing this as a father. My kids are a little bit younger, but still the sentiment was trying to cultivate something so they can kind of understand how this world was going on, even though that my oldest was born and my youngest wasn't born yet. So trying to talk as a father, and I think a lot of the stuff that, seeing all these things, the discussions that were happening, I always saw it as a son, but now seeing it as a father and now thinking about, man, I'm going to have to talk to my kids. I have two boys, black boys. I'm going to have these discussions with them about racial stuff and then still trying to understand identity. Like you still want to be, you're black, but also how do you, juxtapose that, you're also Nigerian and not having that same experience as I had from my parents who were immigrants right away, came, and now I'm that other version. How me and my wife can kind of still keep that for them. I mean, we do with their names, and so we try to do that. So but you also know you can't give them, like sometimes I was like, I wish I could give them the experience I had and this and this and this, but then you realize it's a different time. The book was just trying to kind of create this narrative around stuff that I thought was important and I wanted Obi to discuss and think about, as because those are the things I was going through. So eventually, like a lot of it, not everything, but a lot of the conversations were things I'm like, okay, these are actually things that are happening to me or could happen to me. And so it was interesting writing. Sometimes I felt like, am I writing about myself or am I writing about the characters? And it was an overlay sometimes and some it wasn't, but there was a lot of conversations I wanted to discuss. Now the character, when he first started, the first book, he was 29. Now this book, he's 40. So you see, what it is to be 40, kid health issues, and you're dealing with parents that are getting older, relatives or uncles that are getting older, and start thinking about, we all don't have this time. Time is limited regardless. Hey, this person's this age. Hey, how much time do we have left with them? So that's kind of the way how I wanted to write the book from that perspective.
And the reality is right there. And the reflection on parental wisdom after their loss. You wrote in the book, I'm going to quote what you wrote. It took me time to appreciate your candor and honesty. Many second generation African immigrants reevaluate, I would say, their relationship with their parents after they passed away. Why do you think that is, and how did it shape Obi's character?
I think when you're young, when I wrote in the book, you're idealistic. So you always think you're going to have this breakthrough, and it's good to be very, idealistic. But my dad was always like, hey, son, life isn't that, life is hard. So things aren't going to come as quickly as you think. And when you're younger, I think the quote my dad would always say is like, he said, Chinedu, sometimes you expect too much out of life.
I'm going to use that.
So, when I was 20 something, I'm like, Dad, what you mean you should be? And I don't think he didn't say it at the time. I didn't understand, but like, he wasn't trying to damper my expectations. Like, hey, don't do more. But he's like, hey, life is, you want to be on the clouds, and life isn't on, it's not in the clouds, it's on the ground. So there's a lot of things that are not going to go your way. Not every opportunity you're going to get. And sometimes you're like, well, why not? And it just happens. And you kind of have to still be able to function and go through life even with disappointments, and whether job or someone you want to date or your career or business or whatever you want to do, it may not always go the way you want. And I think seeing him talk about the stuff he had, challenges he had with businesses he tried to start or jobs not happening, and it kind of gave me a perspective as I got old, now that I'm a father, and I can kind of be like, I'm hearing, I hear him talking, and I'm like, this is what Dad would say. So I say that more. I didn't say, I said it when he was alive, but now that he's gone, I say it probably a little bit more because I can hear his voice in there. So I think with Obi's also dealing with that too. A lot of the stuff conversations about with his kids. Hey, you guys play these video games too much. You guys do this. And then his mom comes and says, hey, you and your brother were doing that too. So don't get too harsh on them. You used to do that too. And he has to have a moment of reflection like, yeah. And so he's understanding that the circle of life is kind of coming. Like he was the son, and now he's the father, and now he's being on that other side of things. So I think if we're all, God willing, we're all allowed to have that circle. It's something that it's introspective, and it makes you appreciate life, and how this whole thing, life works. So
That's true. That's true. So I want to talk to you about male vulnerability and emotional silence across generation.
okay.
How does Obi emotional journey in the book speaks to difficulty African men face in expressing their vulnerability, especially to their children?
I think male vulnerability is very important, because I think a lot of times, Africans, we're told to be strong and don't show weakness, and don't, especially, we treat like our sons, be very hard on your sons, your daughters, be like this. Him showing in the book, he's very affectionate with his son. He'll give him a hug or a kiss on the forehead, and allowing himself to do that. And that's not something that his father did. And I think something I learned even from my dad is like, because you think, well, why didn't he do that? But he grew up in a different time where, my grandfather, his father he had 15 kids. It was a different generation, a different family structure. It's different. Sometimes the stuff that our parents don't do, we think, oh, they did this because they don't love or care, but it wasn't happening in their household. It was just the structure of it. So a lot of times we're like, well, when you have kids, you're like, well, this is how I saw. Maybe this is how it is. So then you continue that. Um, so I think that's something that, we, as you get older, my generation, I saw that. And, you take the stuff that your parents did that you thought is good, you take, and the ones that they didn't, not to say they were bad, but you might say, okay, I'll take another glimpse at that, and do it my way. And the way I'm doing it, maybe it's good. My two boys, hey, in 20 years, they might say, Dad, you did this and this. I'm like, hey, I thought that's the right way. One child may say, hey, I like it. The other child might say, hey, Dad, I didn't need that. I needed this. So I don't know. This is all an experiment, you don't know the results till later. So, but yeah, I think vulnerability is very important. And even for me, I remember, when my dad passed, people were, saying, hey, you're not supposed to cry because he died.
Mm.
And I was like, hey, that's my dad. Well, no, you got to be strong. And I always say, God gave us emotion. Crying is part of emotion. So you lost somebody, you're supposed to cry. I mean, you don't have to cry, and but it was that, hey, you got to be strong. And then, I was like, hey, I'm strong. I'm still doing what I have to
You're
do. But
expressing your emotions.
yeah, and I think that's the thing. Sometimes we get to that place where people say, hey, don't do this. So then men and boys kind of chill up, and then they don't show emotion. So they're kind of become stunted emotionally, because not then when things happen, we just kind of hold ourselves, and inside we're breaking down, but we don't want to share, hey man, I'm hurting, like this is affecting me, this is affecting me. So even with my kids, even if they say, hey, this is happening, this is happening, sometimes it's easy to say, hey, you're a boy, don't worry. But then sometimes I'll be like, okay, hey, what's going on? Let's talk. Even it could be they're upset because you took their toy or shut off the TV. So you still ask because maybe there's something else behind that. Trying to be more intuitive of their emotion, not to say to be intuitive to understand their feelings and how they feel, so they feel comfortable with like, hey, this is happening to me, mom or dad. Hey, this is happening. Can we talk? So that's the thing that I think African, we have to do better at that. There's a strength in being showing vulnerability. That's a strength. So I don't think that's something we should shy away from and say, hey, don't show anything. That's not how it is. So I hope that's something I wanted to discuss in my book. And for Black people in general, men, we don't show emotions. We don't talk about how we feel. We don't talk about all these things. So a lot of our lives are kind of wrapped around job success or economic success, or we like sports, and that's kind of where the conversations are. And then a lot of times, a lot of people, one of my good friends, when he had his first child, he had his son, and he was messaging me, and I could tell something was going on with him. I'm like, hey man, let's talk. And we talked, and he was just discussing how, hey man, having his kid, his life, things this way. And I was kind of explaining to him like, yeah, that's how it goes. And he kind of was like, hey man, I appreciate that, because I didn't really know how to feel, or I didn't know how to express it. So I was happy that you reached out and were able to
That support is so
discussion.
important that you're able to give it to him. It's not only pertain to African men that they don't show emotion. Globally, that's how men are raised. That's why they say men has to be the one to fight war. Men has to be, because it is as if they don't have no emotion. And the society actually raised men in centuries to be this way. And we have to change it.
Yeah, no, that's true. And we do, because emotional intelligence is very important, and how we deal, and especially with men now, you're with women, men have to share, before it's like, hey, no, the man pays for everything, the woman does this. It ain't like that no more. Women make equal to more than us. Some men are like, oh, my wife makes more than me. Oh no, I'm not a man. Like I gotta go do more to show. And you realize it's like being a man is also, we have different roles. There's economics, but economics is not the only thing to be a man. Being a man, you can be rich, but also maybe you're not there for your kids, you're not there for your wife. So what does the money do for you if you're not there for your family? So showing men that, hey, there are layers to being a man, being a good father, being a good spouse. Those are values, and those are things that enrich society, but also enrich your family. That's something that men have to kind of understand, that you play a role in that. And it's not just, I make this amount, other facets to being a man. And I think that's something that men aren't taught. That we're taught, hey, go get it, make as much as you can. That's it. Everything else, don't worry about anything else. And I think that's something I hope that men, we're able to have those discussions amongst each other, and be able to build that inside of them, that we feel our worth is more, it's bigger than just tangible thing that
Material wealth.
Yeah.
Like some of these CEO who are making millions and millions of dollars, and they lack connection with their children.
Yeah, it's something. I was watching a video, and I think we talked about this the last time. They were showing a video of some people in Nigeria. They were building all these houses, and they were saying these are empty mansions. The people don't even go to it, but they spend all the mansions are just sitting there. They say, oh, we just go there for 2 days during Christmas, and after that, the place is just abandoned. But people spend their money. I have to prove, I have to show people, I got to show everybody I did something. And, my dad was like that. He was like, he built houses. And I said, well, Dad, I have to show people, because people will say I didn't do anything in America. I was like, who are you showing it to? Well, I have to show the people there. And it's like, so even with us, we have to still show people, hey, look, this is what I did. So people won't say something about me. Not that you raised your kids or you did well. You have to prove that this building, which is nothing wrong with building a house or whatever, but this shows this is something I accomplished, to prove something. So we're still living in that place of we have to show and prove ourselves to people. So
That
that's
belief system is so common among Nigerians, and I think is actually affecting family in terms of being able to create time to spend with your children. Because if you have to work so hard because you want to build a mansion back home, or even some of our people here who wants to buy a house, many of them cannot actually afford, and they buy this big house, they have to work 2 or 3 jobs in order to be able to come up with a mortgage. So what time do you have to spend with the children when you have to work all the time? And it's the mentality that is being shared a lot among our people, and it's something that it needs to be dive into more, and we have to talk about it more.
we it is because it's like a competition. Like, oh, this person has this, I gotta go do this. This person drives this, I gotta go. So now your mind is always frazzled because you're in competition. You have to live with what you have in it, and I guess appreciate that. I'm not here to say people shouldn't want more, but your life can't be dependent on if I if you have a $1 million house, someone gets 5 million. I'm just using numbers. Oh, I can't sleep. I gotta go get this. I gotta make some more money because I gotta. And as you get older, and I think one of my uncles used to say, you can only sleep in one bedroom at a time. You can only drive one car at a time. You can have 10 bedrooms. You only sleep in one at a time.
And
So he always used to say that, like, hey, it's good to get all this, but at the end of the day, you can only sleep in one room, one bed at a time. So that meant like you can get all this, but be mindful that this is the reality. And I think that's something
And
that,
imagine the pressure they not only on their material wealth, the pressure they also put as a result of that on their children's achievement. Because this person's family, their children achieve so much, they are this, they are that. And you too, you want to push your children that. Didn't you see what this one's doing?
yeah, no, I know that.
So why can't you do the same thing? And I sometimes I know we are Nigerians are go-getters, and I think some of the go-getters comes from competition among ourselves.
Yeah, and
I want to do better than anybody else. I'm going to do as much as I can to actually show this person I could achieve more. What does he or she think she has that I cannot have?
yeah, and I agree with that. And also, because that's the narrative I hear a lot of people like, well, Nigerians were the most educated. And I said, that's good. But I always tell everybody, not every Nigerian is a doctor, engineer. There's a lot of Nigerians who work at another call center, work at McDonald's or Uber driver. There's variations with that. And I think sometimes when you make everybody like this, everyone's like, you forget, even with issues that, not to be too political, even with issues that of immigration in this country, a lot of Nigerians undocumented, but we don't think about it that way because we think, oh no, everyone came in for college. It was like, no, some people visa expired, some people had issues. So sometimes we're so bogged up in the glow of this is how Nigerians are. We as Nigerians forget about the underbelly of there are other people who don't have that. And some Nigerians who are at a certain level, we look down at those people who don't do well. And we don't want to raise them up. We want to say, oh, well, I did for me. What about, I don't know. So we don't care because we just think our achievement, this is how it's achieved. So I think that's something that I always say it's good to balance being educated and to be into those spaces, but you also have to understand that there's more to that than just saying we're the most educated people because education is education. There's education, there's knowledge. A lot of Nigerians, if you ask them about history, this, and this. I don't know any of that.
Thank you for
I
saying
don't
that.
know. I don't know any of that. I just know I learned this and this and this and this. So there's something within our culture, and I don't know if I don't know if it dates back to colonialism or whatever. I can't speak to that, but I think there's something of it's good to be competitive, but when even growing up, my parents are like, well, this person got an A in science. Why don't you get an A in science? And sometimes we don't understand that, every child has different gift or talent. Everyone's talent isn't science. It's good if it is for whoever it is, but Some people, that's not it. Maybe it's good to hone in onto the gift that's good and try to invest and steer them to do this instead of just want you to do this because this is what everybody else is doing. So you need to do that. And, even people who, especially with women who are Nigerian, even the ones who are like, hey, I got a degree and I got this. The parents will be, the next thing the mom or dad will say is, hey, are you getting married? They forget about the whole, you got to college, 25, you're not married yet? What happened? He said, you told me to focus on school. No. Your time's coming. It's time to get married. No. This is it. So it's something that, our culture, I wish it was more of a diverse culture where we could just have those discussions. But sometimes it's good, but then sometimes when you peg people, when you go after people because this person doesn't live here, their house is not this. That's what I don't like. I'm not into that. Like I'm proud of what I have. If someone has something bigger than me, I'm happy for them. I'm like, hey, you did good. I'm not gonna be jealous of you.
And I think, I'm not sure whether you've looked into it in terms of, because of this way we think about everybody wants to achieve, does not allow us to actually look into what are the deficiencies that we're facing as a collective community in America.
Yeah.
Not only among Nigerians, even among Africans. Because as much as, let me say, Nigerians' population is very high in this country, there's nothing that we created that I've seen apart from churches and mosques that focus on community needs.
Agree.
We have many of our younger generation also, like you, who are second generation, and they are in different professions, maybe in medicine, maybe in psychology, because many of them talk about mental health, and they are therapists, they are psychologists, but they have not created anything I haven't seen that focus on just volunteering their time to help their community.
No, I agree with that. And that's something when me and my dad, he was in these, social groups and they would do things and I was like, hey, what are you guys doing to help people? They just help. One of the groups, if you put money and they do something, it's like, well, when you die, they'll give you some money, and which is good. But I was like, you only get the benefit. You're not even going to get the benefit of it. I mean, maybe your family will get it to help you, but what about what's going on? Like you said, a lot of issues that are happening in, our community, and everyone's kind of, we kind of brush it to the side. And I think that's something that we, especially like I said, this immigration thing, I think is something that we as Africans have dropped the ball. We've kind of like, hey, it's just Hispanics, that's it. It's like, no. There's a lot of Africans that are here that don't have student visa expire, undocumented. There's dreamers. One of my friends, she came to the US, her parents brought her here. She was younger and she was trying to go to school and then found out her parents, she was a dreamer. So she had to do different things, come up with different socials, lose stuff. She said it wasn't until Obama came and passed that Dreams Act, Dreamers, where she was able to go get a social, do this, go to school, do that. So, but a lot of times people don't bring that up because they just look at the face of it as Hispanics. They don't understand that, hey, there's other people who aren't Hispanic that are doing this. So you're right. We focus on our achievements, but yeah, volunteering, helping other people, we don't get too much into that. We're kind of
so right about dropping the ball based on the issue with immigration. Now, if you look at the Latino community, as I was reading what their community are doing to help those undocumented, they initiate somebody who will pick up the children of those who are undocumented in school. If anything is going on, if the school suspect maybe ICE may be around, they know they gave a name of who to call that will take over their children if the parents tend to be picked up by the ICE. So many of all these things is being arranged with their community compared to the African immigrant community.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's something that I think is, we just don't, we're kind of tunnel vision. We have our own thing, and then everybody else, if you're not in this, whatever group or whatever you're supposed to be in, people just
Thank you so much for contributing to that aspect of the conversation. So I want to bring it to infidelity and intergenerational pattern. Both Obi and his father, children out of marriage. What message were you trying to communicate about family legacy, forgiveness, and the gender dynamics in those stories?
I think with Obi, I guess Obi's dad, I guess I'll start there. I don't advocate for fidelity, But that's part of human experience in a way. So it's especially, I think Obi's case, his daughter he had with Sade, they were dating, they weren't married, and baby passed away. It's thing, but the father actually having a child while he was still married to his mom. Yeah, that's gonna draw, and then not saying anything for 20 something years. Yeah, that's gonna cause a fracture in the family. Either way, whether if he told the mom when it first happened, it's gonna cause a problem. As it festers and then this lie continues and continues. Yeah, that's gonna cause problems in the family. I was, we hear those stories all the time. So I wasn't really trying, I was just created a storyline in it to create it, but it's something that I think a lot of people, it happens a lot more than we know. So it's more about communication and understanding of the situation. But yeah, it's fidelity is infidelity. It's human fallacy. So it's
And that happens a lot in Nigeria, whereby I'm glad you brought it out because back home they normalize it. Even Obi's father won't hide it if he would have been in Nigeria, whereby he would just come out and say, yeah, I have another child outside from the beginning. When that child was very young, it won't be something later on. So in Nigeria, it's being normalized to be okay to do such thing. And you have some of our men who goes back home and, they have other women and have children by them, even though they have their family here in America. So I'm glad you brought that out because it's part of the issue. If somebody read that part, and I bet they will be able to relate to that story.
it happens. It happens a lot. More than we think it should happen.
I came from a polygamous family where my father has many wives.
Okay.
And it doesn't matter. He will just bring them in. And he doesn't have to explain anything to his wives and said, I'm marrying another. He just said, this is my new wife. It's normalized.
Yeah, well, I know my father, his father had two wives. I guess at the time it was agreed upon that happened. So yeah, that I remember he came from that.
Yeah. In Nigeria's situation, you have other children outside. Actually, the older ones, after the parents get older and they can't take care of the children anymore, is the older children we end up taking care of the younger ones. It's not their responsibility. You, the father who wants to have all these multiple children, should be able to have the plan. And that's why sometimes you end up having to be responsible for other children that you didn't plan for. As the eldest child would be the one to be responsible for the younger one.
Yeah, and that's how my dad, he was the oldest. So when he came to the US, he brought two of his brothers. He was in Chicago. So he's like, I brought one brother from the same mom, same dad, and then the other brother from the same different mother. He's like, I did that because I wanted to bring unity, because I didn't want, hey, you're favoring this side. So I always said with him, he did a good job. I'm not saying everybody appreciated it, but he was always trying to be political, like, hey, I got to favor this side and then this side, because to not feel like, hey, I'm doing something different for either person. And in the US, we're almost like, hey, that's your brother. But there it's like, well, you have a different mom. And this person had this. So he tried to always make it that, hey, we're all brothers, different mom. Okay, but we're all brothers. We all have the same father. We answer the last name is the same. So he was always, even till as he got older, he was still trying to navigate that relationship. Even as people had kids and married kids, he was still trying to navigate that relationship because he was the eldest. He always felt like, hey, I have to make this thing go the way it has to go. So he took that as a big responsibility for him.
And it's a lot. And another thing that you mentioned that I really appreciate, you talk about mental health and sexual wellness in African homes. You included postpartum depression, lack of sexual desire, and family counseling topics, that is often ignored within our community. Why do you think this conversation is essential?
Oh, I guess I'll start with mental health. I think a lot of people, I guess with postpartum, I know people who went through my wife, she didn't, but you understand that as being I guess from the male perspective, and I look at that, having, when my wife, when she was pregnant, she had, we had our first child, you wanted to make sure, like, I didn't think anything was going on with her, but I didn't want anything. So I'm not perfect, so I'm not gonna say I am. But you want, like, hey, honey, are you okay? Do you need a break? Do you need to do this? And I think it's good because it's a transition from you and your spouse, and now you have a child. That changes the dynamics of your marriage. And there's a lot of stressors with kids. So you want to make sure, especially the woman who carries the child for 9 months, all of the things that comes with. And then afterwards, as a man, I wanted to still help. Like, hey, I didn't want to be like, hey, okay, honey, you got it. I'm gonna go do this. You still want to make sure that she's doing okay, because that's a lot. I didn't carry a child, so I don't know what that feels like. So I know there's a lot to that, and there's a lot of emotions and a lot of things that go into that. So I think being able to have that discussion with your spouse and understand, hey, you have to help out a little more, do that. That plays a role in the mental health as well. The sexual thing, I think now, because there's a lot more stuff on commercials about it now. I think before it was a little more taboo, but now you see commercials for this, commercials for this. So I think people are more discussing it more. It's more in TV discussions and movies. As you get older, things don't go the way they used to go. It just happens for men and women, but men is a little bit more discussed more. A lot of times that's something that as men don't want to have that discussion. They're like, hey man, it's not happening to me. And you gotta have to have that discussion, because that affects your relationship with your wife. And if it's not going the way it needs to go, you need to find avenues, whether to talk to a doctor or somebody, so you guys can do that, because that thing there can lead to other problems. And so that's problem there can catapult to a multitude of distance, this, and this. And that can cause the family and the marriage to falter. So I think men are discussing a little bit more. People I know, people have those discussions a little, maybe in more male groups, even friends will talk. I think Black men, African men are a little bit more open to that. More, I think white men, maybe they were having those discussions a little bit earlier. Us, we're like, nah, man, I'm good. Ain't nothing wrong. Maybe there is, and it's okay. You can go to your doctor or whoever, and you can get whatever you need to do to get yourself to where you need to get to. I think those are just discussions, like I said, for me being in my season, those are discussions that people are having. I wanted to have the book to be a relevant book about Black male men getting older. And I think the thing is, a lot of, as Black men age and we get older, a lot of the discussions that we talk about, it's not open, it's not on TV, it's not discussed. And I think women do a better job. Like my wife, her friends, they have a group chat, and they talk about family life, whatever, career, whatever that's going on in their life. And I think that they're allowed to, they can communicate with each other and give each other some encouragement. And I think a lot of times with men, we don't do that. Men are kind of like, hey man, did you watch the game? So that's it. So a lot of times stuff that's going on, men, we don't communicate, and there's a lot going on. And I'm blessed that I have a lot of good friends that, we'll meet up and watch a game, and we'll talk about the game, but we'll talk about life. Like, hey man, how's marriage? How's that going? Well, this is going this way. This happened this way. This happened. So we can express, and then you start hearing other people's stories. You're like, oh, you're going through that too? Or you guys, I thought it was just me. So I think people are expressing that, hey, this is stuff that's happening with everybody, and it's not just singularly you. And you kind of make yourself feel like, okay, I don't need to have this load on my shoulders. I can lower it a little bit and understand that it's a lot. I mean, even with me we have 2 kids, and we'll be like, hey man, we don't really get to go out as much. When we do, it's kind of tough. And then talking with friends like, yeah, we're in the same boat too. We don't get that, this, and this. So it having that thing, men have that discussions amongst each other. I think it's good for us because it allows us to express ourselves in our own way and give ourselves grace. And we don't have to feel like we're Superman. Like, we have to just take in everything. We can allow ourselves to be vulnerable. And I think it's good for our mental health, and it's also good for our physical health with your blood pressure and all these other issues that happen. So I think that's good.
Because it's a lot that we go through, apart from African immigrant community. I think people of color in general in this diaspora, that we don't talk openly about so many of all these issues, especially our men. And I'm glad you brought that into the conversation regarding sexual wellness and family counseling. which is actually could be used for many families because we go through a lot. And if we are not talking openly about those things and that we are not addressing it, it really brings down family structure. And it's very important that you brought it up. And I want to bring you to historical memory and trauma of Biafra. Why do you think it is important to revisit the Biafra in this novel, center on how historical trauma continue to ripple across generations?
I think for me, for Biafra, I know my mom, she doesn't like talking about it. And I know Biafra is within Nigeria, it's a very contentious thing because if you're Igbo, you were, especially, this is how the war was constituted. If you're outside of that, you may say, well, this is how it went. So the truth lies somewhere in the middle, but a lot of, Igbos, a lot of people, my mom, they lived in Portaca, they had to leave there. They lost a lot of their stuff, the trauma. You see people you knew died, this and this and this. So it's a story that wasn't really wrapped in a bow, and I think it still hasn't been told. I think Chimamanda Adichie, she did with Half of a Yellow Sun, but I remember even then when the movie came out, they said in Nigeria they didn't want to show the movie because they said it would cause too much. It would cause, hey, the way the story was told, they didn't know they didn't want to cause problems. Chinedu Achebe wrote his book, There Was a Country. He kind of sided with Biafra, Igbos. There was contention. I think there's still a lot of contention between how it was done. The trauma still is people was killed, people lost their house, their way of life. So I think it's still something that we haven't really dealt with. And I think it's more, and I think in general, I don't think we deal with grief well. I mean, I think when people pass, they die, and then after a while, like, you talk about the person, people are like, hey, why are we talking about this person for? Person's gone. So I think Biafra, since it was a trauma that affected the whole country, but especially the eastern region, is still something that wasn't really told, and it's still not, it's being told here and there, pieces here and there, but it's still not something that everybody can wrap their heads around. So yeah, I think it's still a thing that's there. And then unfortunately, as my mom, her generation, as they get older, a lot of people, younger people, Biafra, it becomes less and less and less. The story kind of becomes very muddled, and no one kind of understands, what's going on. And we don't understand what's going on in Nigeria. I mean, there was a very good documentary I watched about the making of an African colony. It was on Netflix. And it's very good because it broke down how Nigeria was created and how everything. And the historian, he was Nigerian, which I liked because not that having it against other historians, but having someone who's Nigerian, he kind of talked about how Nigeria was created, the Europeans. He talked about the women's riots, the this. So you saw how Nigeria was created. The book ended at the elections before the colonization. So in a way, you saw that the way Nigeria was created, eventually Nigeria was going to lead to some issue because of the way made the country, they kind of proclamated the country together. So I think the Biafra trauma, I think a lot of people still have trauma from that, of how it was done, how many people lost a lot of family members, people didn't feel identity to the country. Some people feel like, hey, is this really my country? I'm Nigerian. But so it's still something that I wanted to discuss because I think the 2020 was the 50th anniversary of the end of the war. I wanted to bring that up a little bit in that discussion. I mean, it was mostly for me. It wasn't for anybody else. Every book I write, I try to sprinkle something about Biafra because I know it's important. And, my mom, she talks about it a lot. So it's an important thing. So I always want to do it. I don't want to be too controversial because I just want to use the people and how they feel and how they deal with it, the political of how things were or weren't. I try to use how discussions that happen from people or Igbo, how they felt. If someone else wants to say it's not, that's okay. I'm not gonna get into that discussion.
I'm glad that you brought it in. And no matter what, we have to talk about the story. It's
Yeah.
the experience of those who were there at that time.
Yeah.
And how it's passed from generation to generation. And there's no way of healing when we don't address something of the past.
Yeah, I agree.
No way of moving forward, because like Chiamanda's movie After Yellow Sun, they should have allowed it to show in Nigeria, whereby it could be part of the healing process, whereby we sit down together. It's not like we're going to fight war with each other as a result of the movie, but it's to say that we are matured enough to actually have open conversation and to heal and to move forward so that we could be in a better place.
Yeah, and I think that's true, because I think you're seeing that now with there's a guy and he's Nnamdi Kanu. He's doing this Biafra thing, separatist. So I remember I told my mom, and she's like, "Hey, look, we already fought. We don't have the energy for that anymore." So there's still that sentiment, but I think the people that now you have to go talk to their parents or grandparents. They're gonna say, "Hey, guys, this isn't how it goes." It's something that I think that also brings it to the collective history of Nigeria. Like, do we know what is Nigerian history? I mean, we know colonial history, but if you ask Nigerians, like, hey, what's the history of Nigeria? And I think when you colonize a country and you add different layers of to make a country, what is the collective history of Nigeria? Or do people even know it? We know what the British said is history, but do we know actual history of that? And I think that's something African countries are still trying to figure that out. We have our independence, but we have our culture, but do we have our history? And history, we don't have, pre-colonial history, we don't have. So
I think I'm going to refer you to a Nigerian professor, Dr. Toyin Falola, to check some of his books. I think he did a very good job.
Okay, I'll check. I'm always interested, so I'll definitely check
I
it out.
think he teaches at University of Texas to coordinate efforts together to bring African in academia together and work together and continue to document African history. Check some of his work. I have many of his books on my shelf.
Okay, I'll definitely check it out.
He really wrote so much well-documented, well-researched work that he published on Nigerian history. And I think you will find that interesting, because even back in Nigeria, there's so many things I didn't know until when I came here. I want to bring you back to aging and returning to Africa. You explore aging in the diaspora and the potentials return to African post-retirement. What are your thoughts on this idea? How do you think that it should be approached by both parents and their children?
Honestly, that's the discussion me and my dad, we were having before he passed, and then my wife. I think a lot of people have a nostalgia for Nigeria. They want to go back to where when they left Nigeria, whatever year they left, this is how it was. And you want to go back, even though it's been 40, 50, whatever years of time you left, to be like, hey, I want to go back. And, the world changed, you changed. So you're accustomed, your life is a certain way. So, my dad, he never, even though he built his houses, I was like, Dad, you want to go back to Nigeria to live? He said, no, because my dad came to the U.S. when he was in his 20s. So he had lived in America, 50 something years or so. So for him, he built the houses because he was the oldest. He built it because he wanted to, but he built it. But he never was like, hey, Dad, you want to go back and live in Nigeria? That wasn't something he wanted to do. I mean, maybe he always said, well, if Nigeria was the way, it was a certain way, how it was in the 70s and the 80s when the Naira was 1-to-1. So I think a lot of people who maybe came to America in the late 70s, 80s when Nigeria, the dollar was stronger than the dollar. But as you get older, you live in America, you have your equity in America. You paid into your Social Security, you paid into your Medicare. So now that you're older, you want to be able to get access to that. In Nigeria, the health care is maybe not as good. So you kind of, You like, hey, I paid in all this money for this. Now I'm going somewhere where I'm not going to get access and I'm not going to get all the things that I need. So that's a discussion. Like I said, my wife, we talk about with her dad, he wants to go and they go and stay for a little bit. But then you people like, oh, I'm going to go stay there full time. You'd be like, I don't know. So I think everybody's different, how you feel. I think it's a nostalgia. I don't want to speak for everybody,
Yeah.
but I think if you've been in the US 40, 50 years, I think it's going to be tough to go back. And you can go stay for, maybe a few months, 6 months, and then come back. Maybe that's something you might do if you're in good health. Yeah, but if your health is not as there, that might not be. And my dad, before he passed, he wanted to, but he had a lot of health issues. We were like, Dad, I don't know. But he wanted to. I could tell he did. But I think even he knew, like, yeah, I'm not sure if I can. But he just wanted to say, I think it's hard to navigate that. But I think it's good to go. But you have to be realistic with your parents. Hey, Mom, Dad, you may not be able to stay there for the rest of your life. But for a month, couple months at a time, that might be something.
Yeah. Because, I'm actually having that conversation, like a community conversation on Zoom, maybe next month with other people about retirement for African immigrants in America, whether to go home or stay here, what are the plans and all that. So, and I think most of the time, the problem with many of us is because the fear of loneliness in this country. Because for many Nigerians, when they came to this country, maybe they came in, they went to school or they went to trade school or immediately they have family. So there's so many things to busy their time. So then when they retire, what is it to do? Am I just going to stay home to do nothing? But it's time for us to have that open conversation and be honest with ourselves. Okay, what are the other things you could actually engage yourself with if you don't even work? How do you integrate into the society and say, okay, maybe I could, do so many other things. Maybe it's something I want to explore other experiences and all that stuff. Instead of saying, I'm going to pack my bag and go back home in a country that does not have adequate health care. Most importantly, adequate health care.
Yeah, especially as you get older. Because I know my uncle, he retired. He went to Nigeria. He was there 10 years. He had been here 40 years. He retired and then he went back to Nigeria and then he came back. Hey, uncle, you going back? He's like, no, not right. He's like, not right. He came to US when he was in his, late 20s or so. So he'd been here a while and then he went back. As you get older, your health, if you're in perfect health, good. But if you have high blood pressure, this, and this, you got to go to your doctor. So if your doctor's visits every couple months, unless you have a doctor in Nigeria that you trust, everything is good. But outside of that, you have your doctor you've been using in the US for 20 years or however long you've had.
Yeah.
You have your visits, you're like, hey, I got to go to my doctor's appointment.
So I want to bring your attention to model minority mindset among African immigrants. And part of what I read in terms of Obi, he felt that his parents avoided criticizing US out of gratitude. Is this mindset tend to be common among African immigrants, or how does it compare to other immigrant communities?
I think so. Africans, maybe older. I think the issue is when you come from a country, when people say, hey, this country, for whatever reason, doesn't have the resources, it's not good, or whatever term you use. I'm not here to say Nigeria is bad or not. But when you have that, people will say, well, you should be lucky to be in America. If not, where would you be? What would you do if you were in Nigeria? You wouldn't have this. So when you say that to somebody, you're almost like, hey, you should be lucky to be here. And not that the reverse is, hey, they should be lucky you here because you're enriching the country. So when you have that mentality of, hey, you should be lucky to be here, then anything that happens, you don't say too much. I think the hard part of being for Africans is that when you're in America, you're Black. Other communities, Hispanic, they have those issues as well. But being a Black and knowing the history of Black in America, you are Black. So whatever issues that they assign to stereotypes of whatever they have of Black people, African, Jamaicans, they're part of that too. So you can't really run from that and say, no. I'm Nigerian. That has nothing to do with me. That's the Black. When they see you, they don't know. We see when Africans get into corporate America businesses, as though Africans are running all these companies and doing all this, they're in the same place that Black Americans are at. So they can say I can distance myself, but you can't, because you're gonna be put into that same category. And people have their own issues with stereotypes of Africans as well. So you're gonna be in that boat whether you want to or not. And also Nigerians, we are people who critique government. Nnamdi Azikiwe's and those of those sort, they critique the colonial government. We had the Chinedu Achebe, his writings, he critiqued the Nigerian government. Fela Kuti, War Soyinka. So we come from a society of people who critique government. So we critique our own government. So if we come here, we can say, yeah, the US is good. But if we see things that we aren't good, if something affects, if you're African, hey, the police, the way they treat people, if you have a black child, I can't say, well, son, no, you're Nigerian. Don't worry about that. They're gonna know. They're gonna know. Not to say all police are bad, but just the stereotype. They're gonna treat you that way. Even my father, who was an immigrant, he used to tell us, "Hey, Chinedu, white people are gonna treat you guys differently." He's knew from his own experience, being an immigrant, being a black person. He know you got to know how to conduct yourself with police when you go to work. They're gonna treat you a certain way. So Africans, we can say the model minority thing, but we don't have that luxury because we are tied into the Black American culture, which is something I'm proud of. So it's not to say it's something I dismiss, but we can't just say, oh no, that don't really affect us. That affects them. We don't have the luxury of that, because those things will affect us too. And either now or later, it's gonna come to us, and we're gonna be swept up in whatever's going on. So
yeah, it's true that we're all black. It's not as if when you go outside, they stamp your forehead and say, oh, you're a Nigerian, you're a Ghanaian, you are not a black person. But I think many African immigrants, your dad have that background to understand it because of his educational background. Not many Africans have such educational background to be able to understand what the history of slavery was, apart from Africans, immigrants in general that came to this country, whether we're talking about even many people of color or even whites, in terms of what the history of this country is all about. Because as an immigrant, you come in, the focus is
job, yes,
jobs and all that stuff, take care of the children, to the extent that even if somebody mistreats you somehow, you just overlook it and you move on. So, and it's the same experience that we share with their children. Because, I just retired from a job where I work in family court, and I deal with a lot of youth. And I have some Nigerians who comes over to visit me during my work hour. And they see the line of people in the courthouse there, and they say, why is these people, so many people in the courthouse like this? What is Americans suing for? And I said, it's completely different. The social structure of this country is different. Imagine back home, if a child should do something, elders around the will correct the behavior and they move on. But in this country, you get arrested for one reason or the other. So there's also that lack of exposure to the structure of this country, how it's shaped. I actually affect the view. And I don't think it has to do with understanding that you are black or you are not black. But I think it has to do with understanding of the structure of the society, not knowing the history.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, that's true.
Of America. So, and in terms of the modern minority mindset, because I know they use that modern minority mostly by the Asians, who they gave that title to. But I'm now seeing it spreading among, Africans, especially Nigerians. You use that word now. Oh, we are modern minority. To me, we have to think about those kind of language, because to me, the black people who are modern minority.
They are. No, they are. I tell African, hey, the reason black anybody from anywhere, the rights that were fought, whether Asian, African, it was because black people fought and died for civil rights. A lot of the things that we have access to, a lot of, you started seeing a lot of opening up of immigration that allowed Asians, Africans come. It was through black people were advocating for immigration to loosen it up. When you look at who was the people who advocated to start advocating for the boycotts in South Africa, it was Black American Congress people. So when Nelson Mandela came to U.S., the first place he went, there was a congressman from California. He went there. They started that. So So when a lot of people, my friends are Black American, they like, they don't see me like that. Say, man, why Africans treat, they'll talk to me like, hey man, you're not like most Africans. And I know what they mean. And I tell a lot of, people who are Africans like, hey man, you have to learn. But even my mom, she came here. She's like, look, I didn't know anything about history till you guys were in school. And I started reading about, you guys were talking about Martin Luther King. And she said, that's how I learned about the culture. So she said that made me start seeing things the way I did. She said, but in Nigeria, I didn't know that. And then vice versa. Africans, people are telling Africans, you guys are sleeping in huts. We see you guys calling the 1-800 number for food or to send money. The stereotypes they've crossed the continent. So this people think this is how everyone is. This person thinks this way. So people think Black Americans are lazy and they don't work hard, even though those are the people who were enslaved. And when we say this as Black Africans from that documentary, 25% of the Africans who were enslaved came from the region known as Nigeria. So these people who have come in, a lot of people, they are us. When they do their DNA test, they're Igbo, Yoruba, whatever. So these are descendants of us. When you see them, you can think that's not us. Who do you think maybe, with slavery, right? But most of them are descended from where we are. So they're no different than us. Language, time has went. But look, you see some Black people like, hey, that person you'll see, hey man, you Nigerian? Nah, man, I've been here my whole life. So that's the thing. So we have to understand the history. So you're right. We don't know the history. We don't know the way the laws that were written that didn't allow Black people to, even post slavery, to get access to things. So those people don't have even a lot of American people don't know that. So expecting someone who came from Nigeria, India, wherever, to know that, they're just going to see, hey, this is the image that they see. And they say, oh, see, you guys are lazy. You guys don't work hard. You guys don't do anything, without knowing the history. And I think that's the issue a lot of times Black Americans have with some Africans, is like, they think they're better. Some Africans think they're smarter. Or, hey, we're smarter, we're more educated. And I said, no, that's not always the case. You guys are educated and smarter. But being Nigerian doesn't mean you're smarter than anybody. Being Asian doesn't mean you're smarter. You have access to resources, but that doesn't mean you're smarter because this is where you're from. And I never like when people say, hey, you're Nigerian, you guys are always all smart. I said, no, I'm Nigerian, but that has nothing to do with me being smart.
And it defines some of the stuff that I would have wished many of these terms that is being used in many communities, whether you're talking about African American, in America generally, people use different words. They come up with different things that is not actually proven by research.
Yeah.
Okay, to understand, are all Nigerians smart? Are all Africans who are here actually think African American are lazy? How many people have you questioned? Or is something that is passed down from talking to one person and this other person say, oh, all of them, that's what they say about us. And like I said, I've seen many African American, apart from the people who fought for civil rights movement, who are really modern minorities, who are in science, they are in business, they are in anything you name. They're also modern minorities.
No, that's true.
It's time for us to start claiming that. So I want to talk briefly about redefining Blackness and intergenerational, intergroup discrimination. There's an ongoing question of who is Black enough in America. How do you think that this kind of gatekeeping impacts solidarity among people of African descent?
Yeah, I think that's something that we saw prevalent was during the election with Kamala Harris. Her dad's Jamaican, her mom's Indian. Like, oh, she's not Black.
Obama.
So it's I don't understand it. Even to me, I think that's something that we have to get away from. And again, we saw that with President Obama. And I think that there's this way that, which is stereotypical of a way there is to be Black, or what Blackness means. For me, for political, like, you may not like I don't care for, the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas. You may, oh, he's not, but he's Black. You may not like his politics, but he's Black. That doesn't take away his Blackness. You just don't agree with the way his political views, and that's okay. But there isn't no one way to be Black or African. We didn't even create the term Black. Black wasn't something we created, but there is no blackness test. And I think that's something I've always dealt with it growing up. Like people like, you black or you're not black enough. And then Nigerians, man, you're not really Nigerian enough. Even for me, I was like, where do I fit? I don't know. So it's something that we just have to appreciate everybody's perspective. And blackness is a big thing. It's not even, I think we define it as just in America. I mean, when you go to outside of Nigeria, the second largest country that has black people is Brazil. Brazil has 100 million black people. So when a lot of these guys who say this, they're like, well, this is blackness in America. And it's like, well, there's different cultures, different cultural things made up even blackness in America. I mean, we talk about people like Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey was from Jamaica. A lot of the Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte, they're from Caribbean. So this thing that we say is blackness of American, it's a combination of various people have come during the times and put their own thing on it. So I think even now with music, I mean, people before, maybe I remember in 2008, nobody even cared. Me and my friends, we were listening to P Square and the Bonds. Nobody, now everybody's Afrobeat, Thames. Before, hey, God, that's African music. Everybody's worried about that. But now that it's reached a high, everybody wants to be a part of it. So I think it's good, but I just think we have to redefine what blackness is a encompassing thing, and it doesn't take away. I think some people who are Black Americans think, oh no, if we do that, then that takes away from everything else. And it's like, no, we're just expanding it. I mean, even in the US, Europeans, Irish, they have their own thing. Germans, Russia, French, they all say, hey, I'm white. That's their cult, whatever that is, that's subsets of it. So I don't know who says white or not, but I'm not this or this or this. So it's just subsets of a larger culture. A lot of Black Americans, they're like, well, why aren't Africans this way? They live in a country that's all Black. So race is not the predominant thing. It could be religion, it could be ethnic group, it could be tribal group. That's how people distinguish between themselves. Hey, I'm this tribe, I'm this tribe, or this. They don't say I'm Black because everybody's Black. So Black is not the prevailing thing. In the United States, Black is is a meaning because of culture and the history of America. In Nigeria and other African countries, is not really saying you're Black doesn't mean anything. It just means differently because everybody is Black.
Black, yes.
Yes.
And that's what it is. African American need to understand that solidarity needs to take place. And it has to take place by recognizing there's differences in all of us. But we just have to acknowledge that differences and appreciate each other, no matter what. The same way you said Sidney Poitier, all those people who came from the Caribbean, and they are part of the civil rights movement. They are part of what, brought this country to fight together and say, no, we have to fight injustice and discrimination. And that's very important. And that brought me to affirmative action. You touched a little bit on affirmative action. What's your take on it? And do you think affirmative action actually help or hurts students of color in the long term?
Well, I guess we're having that debate right now with DEI and all of that stuff. I mean, I think affirmative action, I don't know. I mean, I think it was meant to give access and give opportunities. And I know my father, he told me, in the 70s, a lot of companies and the government was, they were trying to get more Black people in medicine and different fields. So affirmative action was something that was okay because they're like, hey, it's something good. But I think when Ronald Reagan came in, they kind of said, hey, there's too much happening. So then affirmative action went back, and now we're at the DEI thing. We're seeing that on college campuses and corporations. I think we still have this battle in America of we can't distinguish between diversity and qualifications. We keep having this discussion of, oh, this person's Black or Hispanic. Are they qualified? All they said is go to historically Black colleges, reach out to some Hispanic groups or colleges or Asian community. You're just getting a pool of people and they all say, hey, you want everyone to have this degree and this GPA. Okay. That's it. You pick from that pool. You pick who you want. Nobody's telling you to pick people who don't. And these people know this because we all work at companies. My company, they hire recruiters. They say, hey, show me all the people who have the qualifications. They bring the people. They interview them. You decide. You look at their qualification. If they meet the qualification and then you like what they do, they get the job. They don't get it. So I think diversity is good. I don't think it's a bad word. I mean, when this country, we're a diverse country. I mean, the United States is made up of various people who contribute: European, Asian, Hispanic, Black, African, Jamaican, whatever, Indian. That's what makes America what it is. That's a strength to me. So when people want to say it's not and say, no, I don't want it to be a strength, but when it's time for money, you take our money, we all spend our money on all these corporations. That's our money. You want our money? I don't like the direction it's going because I think that's the heart of who we are. And it affects people of color because we get affected. Companies aren't going to go reach out to certain places. Companies now are going to be mindful, like, hey, this person, are they qualified? And that's something that is a stigma that happens all the time with people of color, especially, and then one of my friends who's coworkers, he was Hispanic. He said the same thing. So a lot of the issues that Black or Africans think is just us. You talk to other communities, they'll be like, man, that's the same thing we going through. So I think affirmative action is good. I mean, I think it's to give people access. It's not to give anybody a leg up. If everyone said you have to have a bachelor's degree. If you have high school, they don't get it. But we also know sometimes we've seen in America that Black, Hispanic, Asian have all the requirement. The white sometimes don't have it. And then they'll be like, well, they have potential. They have all these other things. And they say, well, they have this. They have all these intangibles that's not in the resume or in the requirements. They like, no, they have it. But for us, we don't get the benefit. If we don't meet the requirement they say to the T, we don't get it. If we say, hey, we need 5 years experience, we got 2. We need 5. You say you need a degree, you don't have a degree, but we got experience, we don't. So we're always held to this. When I say not just Black people, but people of color are held to this higher standard. And not to say most the white people, a lot of them are qualified too, but they're usually given the benefit of the doubt. And we've seen studies that have said that when they interview Black or Hispanic or people of Arab descent, the interviewers are tougher on them. They're like, well, they didn't get this right. But when they interview a white person, they're like, oh, they try to encourage them. Like, see, I see something they have. They can do it. But for us, they don't see that. They're like, well, you don't have it. Well, they don't have it. So I think that's something that we're still dealing with in America. And unfortunately, the way things are going, I told my wife, I don't know what the next 20 years looks like in America. I'm looking at my kids. I don't know. I mean, because we are seeing a sea change. We think it's just, hey, this person came back in office. But we're seeing companies go a certain way. And we think, is this just for today or is it going to be something going forward? And how are they going to be affected in the school system? How are they going to be affected in the job market and how they're seen? So I think it's a scary time now, I think, in America. I think we all have to acknowledge that. And we just have to kind of see however this goes. But it's still America's strength is diversity. And without racial, ethnic, cultural, religious diversity is what makes America what it is. So when you take that away, I don't know how strong you can be as a country because we need everybody. I don't care what color you are. So we need everybody to be great. I think that's something that I know there's fear from certain groups that fear like, hey, the country's changing this way, country's changing this way. That happens, but that doesn't take away from, the immigrants. They made America what it is. It's scary because you watch the news, you be like, man, what's going on today? But you're seeing the long-term erosion of things. You're starting to say, okay, is this going to be how it goes? Because I know companies, they get scared, they retreat, and they usually sometimes don't go back again. They usually stay where they're at. And like, hey, you can do this again. They're like, nah, let's just stay where we're at.
You touch a lot of many things, and it's time for us to put our effort in our community as well. In terms of educational system, we have to improve on it. We have to dedicate ourselves to our community in a collective effort to help our youth as they grow into, mentoring program instead of, even though we want to fight the system, we have to keep up the fight, but also we have to put a lot of effort into the community to, work into our educational system.
No, that's true.
How can we bring it up to high standard? A lot of all these things for this guy to get into the office again is as if, he's on a DEI mission as well as woke. All those things must have contributed to where we are today.
No, I agree with you, and I think that's something that we don't have a lot of education, being educated, but knowledge is important. I think a lot of people before, 30 years ago, you would watch CBS, ABC, NBC for news, then cable news. Now people don't watch news. Now people are getting news from TikTok or from YouTube, and there's misinformation, and people are saying this and people are saying that. And the thing that's sad is people have a phone. The phone is powerful. So much information is on this phone, but people don't even research it. So people don't even know when people were talking about tariff. People say, what's a tariff? And then they go Google it. Oh, I didn't know what tariff meant. What's this mean? And you start thinking we have all this technological advancement. Everyone's waiting for someone to feed them information. And people have to understand, whether Democrat, Republican, whoever, you need to go research and see, hey, what are they saying? The news isn't always going to feed you what you want. You have to feed yourself for your own knowledge so you understand the world. But if people want someone else to tell them what to think, how to feel, what they should do without reading that. So yeah, you're right. Knowledge, especially younger people, because a lot of younger people, they're getting their news from TikTok. So these guys on TikTok, they're not journalists. They're just guys that are influencers saying something. Someone say, hey, this guy on TikTok said this. Is it true? I don't know if it's true. That's what they said. And now you have AI coming in with that. And so we're in a time where what's true, what's real, AI can create these different things, how people talk, and people can create something. We have TikTok with influencers. So getting actual information is going to be harder to get because everybody's not sure. You can tell somebody 2 + 2 is 4. If someone says, oh, this guy told me it's 5. The other guy says it's 6. You're like, no, this is it. No, it's 5. So who's right? You're right, but how do you convince the other person that it's not? So it's kind of a scary time right now.
Now, you said something important earlier. Just because you have a college degree does not stop you from reading.
Yeah.
That's one thing that is lacking in our community. I don't care whether you're African American or African immigrant. A lot of time, the moment we have that diploma in our hand, we don't think it's something that I need to continue to educate myself. I need to continue to read. I need to understand what is going on.
Yeah, that's important because I think I read somewhere 50% of Americans didn't read one book last year. So you don't read, so people aren't reading books now. And now also another thing that's also getting bad is before we would have our newspaper sites, but now these sites have paywall. So now you go to your local newspaper, you get 3 free articles and you got to pay. So we're not reading, but now we have way more different ways to read. We have audio books. So now you can go and listen on your phone. We have different methods to read books, and now we don't. So it's scary now. We have ebook. We have all these different things, but yeah, it's scary. They're not educated, don't have knowledge. Anybody can fool them and tell them whatever you want, and they're not going to be able to function. So I think that reading is very important. How do we read more? How do we engage more? Have intelligent conversations with a lot of the people who get a lot of attention. Influencer talks about this. People who don't have influence are talking about politics. This guy talks about music or sports. Now he's talking about politics. He or she doesn't know what they're talking about, but they have a big following. So people are like, well, so-and-so said that, so I guess it might be true. Even though just because so-and-so is good at music or sports, that doesn't mean they know about politics, policy, these are those natures. So it's the scary thing is that we're all becoming like I guess what's the fella zombies. We're all becoming zombies. hey, that guy, we're just following somebody. So reading, not even just books, but reading articles, reading stuff. We don't read a lot. And I think it's causing a lot of problems for
It
us because
is.
we're not having the education or the knowledge to know what's happening.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So thank you so much. So finally, what important message would you like the reader to take away from this book?
Um, I think just that life has a lot of ups and downs. I mean, I think that I guess the time when it all falls down, I think that you see that as people grow, we see the different perspectives of life change, and a lot of stuff influences us. Stuff that happens. A lot of life is what happens. Almost said 90% of life is what is your reaction to what happens to you. So
Mhm.
a lot of the book and the discussions were just things that happen to the character or outside things that happen to the characters, and they're having those debates. But just that life kind of, I guess the way I ended the book, life doesn't have. I don't want to be a dark. Life isn't a TV show. It's not a merry. It's hard. It's a life. You have your moments of glowing, and then you have your times of sadness and grief, and it's kind of a yo-yo effect, and you have to find times to enjoy those brief moments when things are good and enjoy that. And I think sometimes in life, I know for me, my dad passed. I didn't, sometimes you took things for granted, holidays, everyone gets around and you see people, you just seeing people every day or calling on the phone, you take for granted. You think, oh, this is how it's always going to go. And then 1 minute,
They
you
go.
can't call a person no more. You can't see them. Just embracing life and just enjoying each moment and just growing and learning to grow. And I think the characters, even though the book ended, the characters are going to keep growing and figuring out, and they're going to be living life and trying to navigate the world that we're in. I wanted to end it. I didn't. When I ended the book the way I ended it, I didn't. I ended it before anything happened with my dad. I didn't know how to. I wanted to end it to show like, hey, this is life, and
Yeah. Yeah.
so I hope people enjoy the book and they take something from it. There's, it's heavy, but there's light moments in the book
Yeah.
where people talk about various things that's going on in their life. And again, I just hope people take what their perspective from it and they enjoy the characters and understand them, and they can empathize with them. They can laugh with them. They can cry with them. And then they can understand that maybe they take parts of whoever, whatever character they likes, that they can, apply that to somebody or themselves in their own lives.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Chinedu Achebe, for sharing your wisdom, your personal journey, for writing a story that reflects on complexity of identity, family, belongings for Africans in the diaspora. When it all falls down, it's more than a continuation, it's a mirror of many of us navigating generational expectation, cultural shift, and personal growth. Your honesty is tackling subjects in fatherhood, mental health, legacy, love. Give us permission to have conversation we often avoided. So to our listener, if you have not already, I encourage you to pick up this book, not just to read, but to sit on it and to sit with it, to reflect, to talk, to continue this necessary conversation in our homes, community, and families. So until next time, stay grounded, stay open, and keep telling our stories.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Pansa Pansa Live Podcast. We hope to have you back with us in the next episode as we continue to explore the nuances of the African immigrant experience. If you'd like to connect with us, you can email us at talk@pansapansa.org. That is talk@pansapansa.org. And follow us on Instagram at pansa.pansaforum. Until next time, remember to spread kindness and love. Thank you and take care of yourselves.